Welcome back to Cheche, the program where opinion counts. Today's guests are Ibrahim Wathane, the chairman of the board of the Land Development and Governance Institute, and we now have with us Jared Opio, who's actually the Ford Kenya Member of Parliament for Awendo. He's also Deputy Secretary General of the party. We're unpacking the various bits of legislation around land, attempting to separate fact from fiction. It's a controversial issue, and before the break, Mr. Wathane, you were telling us, you were giving us the advantages of the bill, the various bills, but you'd also spelt out some of the concerns people had. And David, you were about to come in on a question I think that had to do with the rights of individuals.
Not quite really. I mean, the issue is there is a lot being said about public participation in legislation. And I know that Wathane sits in a, is in a position where he should have contributed to this bill. So I'm just, from where you sit, was there adequate public participation? And did you actually participate in the preliminary discussions that led into this legislation?
That's a good question, David. I think it's useful to appreciate that you're looking at pieces of legislation that are products of different task forces. There was a task force that was charged, and that task force was formed in 2012. I think June, July. That was meant to look into the preparation of amendments and regulations to the existing laws. The task force worked from then. I think it gave its report sometime in 2014. There was another different, and I need to add there, David, that that task force went around the country vastly. I know, because our colleagues were on that task force. It was at the initial stages chaired by, I think, the Chief Land Registrar. Some members of the Law Society of Kenya were involved, the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, the Kenya Institute of Planners, members of the ministry. At the tail end, when the commission came in, the membership of the commission came in and actually chaired that task force to the end. Then there was a different task force that was preparing the community land bill and the evictions and resettlement bill, which I sat on. The task force also went vastly around the country seeking views from the public, all regions of the country, and finally gave out its report in early 2014 also. But then there was the task force that prepared the historical land injustice framework. That task force was formed. The other two task forces were formed by the Cabinet Secretary for Land. That time it was the Minister of Land, James Orengo. The historical land injustices task force was a creation of the National Land Commission, and that too traveled vastly within and without the country, collecting views. And I want to imagine then they should have taken into account the diversity of the country. I know then there was the last task force which I referred to, which prepared that was established by the current acting cabinet secretary in the Ministry of Lands, which prepared the minimum and maximum land holding acreages bill. Now that task force probably is the one that can face a major challenge on the matter of public participation, because due to the fact that they were dealing with shrunken space, they were working towards the tail end, I think sometimes in May or June, to prepare that framework. So they never quite got the option of going out to people. The fiscal planning bill, I know it was also prepared and had some reasonable public participation. I remember, for instance, there was a meeting at the Kenya School of Government in which I attended, which was under the CIC, chaired by the CIC, where representation from various counties was there at the level of the CEC. I think in terms of participation, public participation, that's the kind of thing. So that
you would think in your assessment that there has been sufficient to public participation in this exercise. Yeah. So that the problem then will be to what end did that public participation result, and therefore the content of the bills.
Exactly, and that's why, in my view, it has been extremely wise of the Parliamentary Committee on Land, the National Assembly Committee on Land, to put the bills on public space. And Adudwak, allow me to mention to listeners that and viewers that these bills are available on the law reform website. I want to imagine they should also be available on the CIC website as of now. They are also available at the government printers for people who may want to access them. That's what I was saying. That's why I think it was very helpful of the National Assembly Committee to have referred people to the website with the bills and asked people across the country to bring in their views, and beyond that provided a forum in Mombasa where stakeholders from civil society, professional associations and the key stakeholders, the Ministry of Lands and the National Land Commission, the Governors Council, to come in and inform the bill.
So if public participation is taking place, why is there so much confusion?
I think that's part of what a listener can discern as we go around this debate.
Isn't it possible to have public participation and public contribution is ignored and drafted?
True, Mutegi, I think that happens in some cases, yes. But I think from where I sit, if we sat in a forum, David, you and Mutegi, and gave our inputs, if you are shaping legislation, and legislation is a negotiation process usually, it's likely that all points or our points of view may not necessarily all find their space on the bill. So obviously, if my point is left out at the tail end, I'm going to be speaking to that omission, and therefore, for me, would work. The voices we are hearing need to be listened to against that understanding that yes, they are voicing their concern, yes, they need to come on the table, and the National Assembly Committee needs to take
but there should be consensus. I mean, the whole process of participation is that at the end there should be some consensus or what would be agreeable to many people. But what is appearing in the criticism against this legislation is that there is another hand that is pushing its agenda in this whole land reform, and which is unconstitutional. The result is unconstitutional, moving powers from the Land Commission to registrars, to the ministry, to the cabinet secretary. So what level of participation happened is one question, and whether that participation was useful in the final analysis or the other forces which perhaps Mheshimiwa may have an idea about because he's in the political arena.
Thank you very much, David. I think a lot of concerns have been raised about actually we have what 3 bills pending in Parliament now. The fiscal planning bill.
Okay, before you joined us, Mr. Muthani gave us an overview of the various bits of legislation under consideration and pointed out some of the contention. And so our question to you, is there a hidden hand in all of this? If we're told that the powers of the National Lands Commission are being diminished, if the CS is, the Cabinet Secretary, the Ministry, is getting back powers that the Constitution had trimmed, is there a hidden hand in all of this? Is the Executive trying to claw back powers? Should county governments be worried?
Yeah, I think our concern has been that the National Land Commission is not being given the space as spelled out in the Constitution. You know, these bills are trying to breathe life to Articles 60, I think 66 of the 63 of the Constitution, and that in doing so, we must make sure that we do not lose track, or rather the picture of what the framers of our Constitution had in mind when they were drafting the Constitution. Circumstances surrounding land issues in Kenya have been very controversial and for a very long time, and we needed an independent constitutional organization to handle land matters away from the influences of the executive. That was initially what was in the mind of the framers of the Constitution. But now, we saw even before these legislations, the push and pull between the ministries and between the ministry and the National Land Commission, and that we are actually trying to give power back to the ministry and by extension the executive, and taking away that power from the National Land Commission against the spirit of our Constitution.
And several of you pick up on this. One question is, can somebody explain the role of the NLC in the land bills as is, and the constitutional role of the NLC? And there's a second one. Nobody's sure about land laws in Kenya. Neither are they sincere about land issues. What happened to the Ndungu report? We should go from there. And there are several viewers echoing, you know, do these bills factor in the Ndungu report? That's one from Enoch in Ngong.
Would allow me to point out that if we were to look back at to 2013, February, when the commission came into office, every Kenyan will either have heard or read about the regular spats between them and the commission. Remember, as we speak, they have a petition pending in the Supreme Court which has not been interpreted. What does that tell us? That for sure there are areas, and remember they have also said it's about their mandate. Now I would invite an objective reader to read the National Land Policy. There was a section that anchored a National Land Commission, and then after you read the policy, remember the police trying to find space in the Constitution. Mheshimiwa, if you remember the history, in 2010, early 2010, when the National Assembly Committee went to Naivasha, they actually they deleted the whole entire section on the National Land Commission. They deleted it. When it came back to us, there wasn't a Land Commission. Remember, through interventions by stakeholders and the then CKRC, the Committee on the Review of the Constitution, the Commission was restored on the constitutional proposals. But the restoration of the proposal of the Commission in the final draft, gave Kenyans a commission which was completely different from what had been anticipated under the policy. If you look at those provisions, they'll tell you advice on a comprehensive framework of registration of title, initiate investigations into historical injustices and make recommendations, monitor and provide oversight on land use planning. To the extent that you see the spirit of providing a commission that was rather advisory, not technical, as was in the initial draft that had actually been deleted. Now, during the enactment of the first draft of laws, the Land Act, the National Land Commission Act, and the National Land and the Land Registration Act, there was some few things happened. The Commission got partial powers on land registration, while other powers remained with the Cabinet Secretary, the Office of the Cabinet Secretary. It got powers to do establish land information management systems. It got technical powers to do settlement programs. Now, no wonder whenever they do, the government tries to do titling, you hear Commission cry out that that's our role, because the Land Adjudication Act, under which the ministry has been doing settlement programs and land adjudication, was not repealed. So what is true, David, is that there are conflicts in the existing laws. If we do not thrash them out, what we will continue to have is the kind of dysfunctional technical processes that have emanated in the Ministry of Lands. I think the question that begs is, who then should do what? And that again is an issue of interpretation of the Constitution, the function of the Constitution against the laws as were shaped.
Certainly. Sir, if you suspect political mischief, what is the National Assembly going to do about it? Because clearly it does seem as if in the, controversy swirling around these various bits of legislation, politics is coming in. And we saw that at the weekend when people at the coast were encouraged by the opposition to shoot down these bills. Opposition members were, asked to ensure that they don't pass. And yet, as we've heard, they have some positives and they have some negatives. So what's the way forward in all of this?
Yeah, I think we are trying to cure certain anomalies and confusion, as you are saying, through legislation. But I also think that we are trying to cure cancer by just smearing some oil on on the wound, but we are not going to the root cause.
So what would your prescription be?
I think the best thing we would do would be to look at the task force's reports, with the ones that he has mentioned, and also confront the issue of the TJRC report on land. Then after we deal with it properly, and we engage the public to debate about this. You know, we have been speaking about public participation, which is elitist. But really, people who are knowledgeable about certain issues are made to speak, and then they think that is public participation. We need the villagers to say something in their own lay language, and we capture everything that they say, so that when we come up with legislation, we capture the spirit of the nation.
What is the spirit of the nation? Because various people have various interests.
Yes.
Say, for instance, the community land.
Yes.
What's the definition of community land? Is it land belonging to, in Kajiado, where we have group ranches? Who owns that? Is it Masai or the governor?
Yeah, I know.
What's the definition of community land?
I appreciate that even now as we speak, there is a very thin line dividing the definition between public land and community land. So those are issues that must be discussed, and then we really come up with proper definitions that satisfy.
In fact, some of the recommendations are very drastic. That a community will have a title deed,
which allows it to negotiate.
To negotiate, it can even take loans.
Yes, on
behalf
that
of that land.
Yeah.
The demarcation of that land, the ownership, the trustees of such community land are issues that are likely to be difficult across this country.
Yeah. So that's why I was trying to say that there are things we are running away from, like the reports of task forces that he has spoken about, and even the TJRC report. We consolidate them. We isolate the issues that were really, because otherwise we will be coming back to the same things we have been facing in the past. Then now we legislate at the back of, with all these reports at the back of our mind. You know, we know that there's a conflict between the Ministry of Land and the Land Commission.
Even without those differences.
Yes.
If you talk about minimum and maximum, what is that? How can we agree about that? How can Kenya agree? How is it possible? Because there are various completely difficult situations. How do you agree? If somebody who has a quarter of land somewhere in Kiambu, or 1/8, you tell them no to match. The other way is, how can we be agricultural viable? If we are splitting this country, every quarter of land is a building.
That's
how
true.
can we? So
that's true. That's true. That is what he said. What our
Mr.
Mwadhani said was that I think we need to relook at our national land policy, so that we even ask ourselves, what is important for Kenya today? Do we need decent housing for our people? Would we need our people to have land? Because some people, if I inherit maybe 3 acres of land from my parents, then I have 4 sons.
And you give them what?
And I give them quarter. Then they will also have sons. So we must choose as a nation what we want to do with ourselves. Whether we want.
Although women can inherit land now.
Yes, daughters. If I have 3 daughters and 4 sons, then I divide for them. And then what are we talking about?
Okay, the flip side of Mutegi's question is this. Maximum acreage can be capped to give room so that many Kenyans can own a piece of land. Hence, there should be no minimum acreage. And that came from Albert in Nairobi. Is that, no, it's not workable? Mutegi, why not?
If you look at other countries, people live in towns. Then there is space for farming. What they did with the settlement, you know, when I went, the IDPs when they were settled, they get maybe 30 acres. Then you divide that acres, everybody gets a quarter, which is absolute nonsense. Because those quarter where you have is not viable at all. But if they build a town for them, then leave the rest of land for farming, for agriculture, or for whatever, that would be reasonable. But you can't have everybody have land in this country. It is not possible. It's nonsense.
It's like
and there's another practical
I think everybody should have
here.
some land. I mean, land must not be seen in terms of its use.
Should everybody have land, or should we rethink our attachment to land?
Where will you get it from?
It should be possible. It's not to say that everybody must have land, but people should be allowed to have land.
People should have
the
houses where to
acre,
live, not land. People should have shelter, not land.
Allow me to bring this point. Now, this discussion gives you a very good peek into what happens when you are trying to legislate matters land. I have sat in task forces and people argue, talk for days on end before you agree on some point. At the end, there are some people still who do not even agree. But you see, you must put down a position for the country. So my request to Kenyans is this. We need to perfect the existing laws. Yes, we need amendments. Please read the proposed bills and read the existing laws and give inputs through members of parliament, still open. Let us read the other bills too and try not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but give input to improve the bill, because I think there's still space. It has taken a lot of work, a lot of public funds. Yes, Kenya requires a community land law framework, otherwise northern Kenya. If you talk to communities in northern Kenya, they are still very worried about the fact that an investor can walk in there and they are not sure how to relate with it. That framework we are talking about does give them an opportunity to relate with investors. It does give them an opportunity to protect their land. If they want to privatize, it gives them a process through which they can privatize if they wish. But they make the decision on their land, they protect their land. When they want to do land use, the county governments would need to approve the plans. The county government has a role as the trust to unregistered community land. So there are some clear positives, but there are improvements that can be made. So I would urge key players, particularly Council of Governors, which is very critical to the county platform, to package recommendations that can improve the framework.
We have to take a quick break now, but listen to this question, which I think is situated within the resettlement bill. Land in Kenya is very emotive. Those in Rift Valley with large acreage feel there is something fishy on minimum acreage. El Nino is coming. Forest evictees are by the roadside. Evictees due to landslide in Nathanai in Nakuru are in a camp 10 years later. Who will save them? And that's Kobilo in Nakuru.
That's why I spoke to it, that I think in the framework that we are talking about, the element of resettlement is not spoken to. And I think members of parliament are listening, National Assembly members, including our discussion. Those are things that you can pump into that omnibus bill before you close your discussions.
Do you have a different perspective from that? What would you say to Kobilo?
No,
the people who are still living in camps?
I agree with Madani fully that any legislation that we are trying to come up with must address the issue of the squatter crisis in Kenya. The squatter problem is there across the country. I think it's
squatter evictees.
We have evictees, we have squatters, and even the IDPs. And it is unfair. When you fly over Kenya, you see large tracts of land, and it's unfair that someone in Kenya does not even have a small space to lay his head. So those are issues that these legislations must address.
But that goes back to the point that Mutegi was making. Do you need a place to lay your head, or do you need land?
What I said myself is that we must look at our national land policy and decide for ourselves what we want. I think for myself, what we need is decent housing for our people and proper agricultural land for the nation.
And what the policy provides for access to land, not necessarily ownership for everyone single Kenyan, because you will never, given our rate of population explosion, you will never be able to get land for every one person, but you need every person to have a house to be able to do business around some space. Access is highly emphasized in the national land policy.
Okay, we'll take a break now. You're watching Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. Our SMS number is 22422, and you can tweet us using the hashtag Cheche.